Night shift workers keep finding things in hospital rooms that don't exist. A call light from a wing with no patients. Wet footprints inside a locked elevator. A room that appears on no floor plan. And a sticker left on your uniform that says, "After hours only." These are real accounts from hospital night shift workers. Watch till the end. Story 1. The vacant room with a call light. I picked up extra nights at a small-town hospital in eastern Ohio because my rent went up and my pride wouldn't let me move back in with my mom. It was the kind of hospital where everybody knew everybody, where the ER had 4 rooms, and the nurses still called the doctors by their first names. Nights were usually predictable. You'd get a few chest pains, a drunk who fell off a porch, an elderly patient who couldn't breathe right and needed observation. Mostly, it was quiet charting under fluorescent lights, the steady beep of monitors, the smell of sanitizer that never really leaves your hands. That first week on overnights, my charge nurse, Marla, gave me a quick tour of the floor and pointed out places that mattered after midnight. Medication room, crash cart, supply closet, the only working coffee machine. When we passed a closed double door with a keypad, she said, "That's the old Med SURG wing. We don't use it unless we're overflowing." She said it like she was talking about a shutdown highway. Not scary, just inconvenient. Around 1:20 a.m., I was sitting at the nurse's station finishing discharge paperwork when the call light panel chirped. A soft electronic ding. Then a red indicator lit up next to a room number I didn't recognize at first. 3 West, 14. I stared at it, because on our active side, rooms were 1 through 10. There was number 14. Marla glanced up and frowned. "That's not right." She tapped the panel like it might be stuck. The ding repeated, patient, but insistent. "Is that the old wing?" I asked. "It's on the other side of the doors," she said. She didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She just looked tired, like a problem had decided to show up. Marla picked up the phone and called security. "Can you send someone to 3 West? We're getting a call light from the closed wing." She paused, listening, then said, "Yeah, 3 West, 14. Another pause. "No, we don't have a patient in there." She hung up and looked at me. "Don't go over there alone." I didn't plan to, but the call light kept dinging every 30 seconds, and the sound got under my skin, because in a hospital, that sound is a responsibility. It's designed to be annoying for a reason. A few minutes later, our night security officer, Todd, appeared at the station with his key ring and radio. Todd was a former corrections guy, thick neck, slow voice, the kind of presence that usually made me feel safer. He looked at the call light panel, then at Marla, then at me. "Which room?" he asked, like he already knew the answer and didn't want to say it. 14, Marla said. Todd nodded once. "Let's see." Marla stayed back to cover the floor. I followed Todd down the hall. The hospital at night feels different, in a way you can't explain to someone who hasn't lived in it. The lights are dimmer. The air feels still. You hear things you ignored during the day. The ice machine cycling, distant elevator cables, the way your own shoes sound too loud on wax tile. We stopped at the double doors to 3 West. Todd punched in a code. The keypad flashed green. The doors unlocked with a heavy click that echoed down the empty hallway. Inside, it was colder. Not dramatically, but enough that the hairs on my arms lifted. The wing smelled faintly dusty, like closed-up classrooms in summer. The overhead lights were on, but a few flickered, and the far end of the hall fell into a shadowy haze. Doors lined both sides, each with a small window in the upper half. The call light dinged again. Louder in here. Todd's eyes tracked to the ceiling panel. A red light blinked above a door halfway down. 3 West, 14. Todd walked first, one hand near his radio. I stayed a step behind him, trying not to think about how empty everything was. The nurse's station on this side was abandoned, computers unplugged, old forms curled at the edges like no one had touched them in months. When we reached room 14, the door was shut. The call light above it blinked steadily. Todd pushed the handle. Locked. He tried his key. The lock turned. The door opened a few inches, then stopped, like something was pressed against it from the inside. Todd leaned his shoulder into it gently and pushed again. The door gave. The room lights were on. The bed was made with hospital corners. No wrinkles. No patient. The blinds were half open, showing nothing but black night beyond the parking lot lights. The call light cord dangled neatly beside the bed, and the button at the end of it lay on the sheet, like someone had placed it there. Todd stepped in, checked the corners, Checked the bathroom. Empty. No movement. No sound. Except the call light still dinging in the hall. I walked to the bed. Looked at the call button. It wasn't wedged. It wasn't stuck under a pillow. It was sitting openly. And yet, the system thought it was being pressed. Todd reached out and picked it up. The dinging stopped immediately. Both of us exhaled at the same time, like our bodies had been holding tension without asking permission. Probably a short in the line, Todd said, but his voice didn't have the usual confidence. He turned the button over. On the underside, taped neatly, was a patient ID sticker. My stomach dropped because I recognized it instantly. Name, date of birth, medical record number, standard hospital sticker, printed black on white, but it wasn't from a year ago. It had today's date and time printed at the top, like it had been generated during the shift. Todd stared at it. "Where would this come from?" he asked quietly. My mouth went dry. "You can only print those from the charting system," I said. "From an active patient." Todd walked into the hallway and looked toward the abandoned nurses' station. "There shouldn't be any power to those printers," he muttered. We brought the call button back to our side of the doors. Todd locked the wing again. We returned to the nurses' station where Marla was charting. When Todd showed her the sticker, her face tightened. "Throw it away," she said. "Todd thinks someone's been in there," I said. "That sticker was printed tonight." Marla's eyes flicked to the hallway, then back to me. "Listen," she said quietly. "We're short-staffed. We don't go exploring closed wings at night. If something's wrong with the call system, maintenance will handle it in the morning." Todd didn't argue, but he didn't throw the sticker away either. He slipped it into his pocket like it was evidence. The rest of the night tried to return to normal, and for a while, it almost did. Then around 3:05 a.m. our ER called. They were sending up a patient for observation. Elderly woman. Confusion. Dehydration. Possible UTI. Nothing dramatic. I prepped room 7. Fluids ready. Warm blankets ready. When the patient arrived, she was quiet. Small. Wispy white hair. A hospital band already on her wrist. But she kept looking past me, over my shoulder, toward the hallway. "What are you looking at?" I asked gently. She blinked slowly. "They keep turning the lights on," she said. "What lights?" She pointed, toward 3 West. "The empty rooms," she whispered. "They don't want me to sleep." I forced a smile. Blamed it on confusion. Blamed it on infection. The way you do when you want a simple explanation. But when I stepped back into the hall, I saw it. Through the narrow window in the double doors to 3 West, a light was turning on and off at the far end of that abandoned corridor. Not flickering. Deliberate. On. Off. On. Off. Like someone pacing. And flipping a switch. My skin went cold. Todd was at the desk. When he saw my face, he didn't ask what was wrong. He lifted his radio. "Control, I need a second officer on 3 West. Static crackled back. "Todd, you're the only one on duty tonight." Todd stared at the door window, jaw tight. "Then call the sheriff," he said. "Now." The light inside 3 West stopped. For a moment, everything went still. Then a shape crossed the window. Not clearly human, more like a shadow at shoulder height, moving too fast to see details, but fast enough to be unmistakable, like it had been waiting for us to look. Todd pulled his keys out. "Stay here. I'm not letting you go alone," I said. He hesitated, then nodded once. "Fine, but if anything happens, you run back and hit the code blue." We unlocked the doors again. Cold air rushed out. The hallway lights were all on now. Bright, too bright, like a set stage pretending to look harmless. We walked to the far end. Todd checked the light switch. Normal. Nothing loose. Nothing broken. Then behind us, the call light dinged. Room 14. The red indicator blinked again. Patient. Demanding. We approached the door. Todd opened it. The lights were off. The bed still made, but the call light cord was stretched tight, pulled down toward the floor, like someone was holding it. Out of sight, behind the bed. Todd stepped inside, then froze. "Back out," he whispered. On the floor beside the bed was a smear of fresh dirt. Not dust, wet dirt, like it had just been tracked in from outside. Todd backed out slowly, closed the door, never taking his eyes off the gap beneath the bed. The latch clicked. The call light stopped dinging. Then inside the room, something moved. Just a soft shift. Fabric brushing against a plastic mattress cover. Todd grabbed my elbow, walked me back toward the doors. Didn't say a word. When we locked 3 West again, the hospital air felt warmer, like we'd come up from underwater. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later. They searched the wing, room by room. They found blankets hidden in the supply closet, empty water bottles, snack wrappers from our vending machine, but they did not find a person. When morning came, and day shift filled the halls with normal noise, I tried to convince myself it had just been a transient, someone looking for a warm place, someone messing with staff. But when I got home and changed out of my scrubs, I found something stuck to the inside of my waistband, pressed there deliberately, a patient ID sticker, blank, no name, no number, just today's date and time. And beneath it, in small block letters, someone had written 3 words, pressed hard enough to leave grooves in the paper. After hours only. Story 3. The patient in isolation 6. I worked nights as a respiratory therapist at a small rural hospital in southern Kentucky. Overnight shifts were usually predictable. A few breathing treatments, the occasional ventilator check in ICU, maybe an anxious family member pacing the hallway. After midnight, the hospital always felt like it was holding its breath. The lights were dimmed, monitors hummed softly, and the air felt heavier, like even the building was tired. We had 6 isolation rooms at the far end of the 2nd floor, originally meant for infectious cases. By the time I started, they were rarely used. Room 6, at the very end of the hallway, was technically functional, but everyone avoided assigning it unless the census forced it. It was farther from the nurse's station and closer to an old service corridor that had been partially sealed off during renovations. I never asked why. One Thursday night around 12:40 a.m., the ER called up to say they were admitting a middle-aged male patient for observation. Severe dehydration, confusion, possible heat stroke. Nothing dramatic. Just another case of someone who pushed their body too hard and ignored warning signs. They put him in isolation 6. When I first entered the room, he was sitting upright in bed, eyes open but unfocused. His chart said his name was Daniel Crow, early 40s, no significant medical history. Found wandering near a highway construction site, disoriented. "Mr. Crow," I said gently, stepping closer with my equipment. "I'm here to check your breathing." His eyes shifted to me slowly, like the movement took effort. They weren't wild or aggressive, just distant. But what unsettled me was the way he kept glancing past me, toward the door. "They're not supposed to be here," he said quietly. I assumed he meant hospital staff. Delirium can make patients paranoid. "You're safe," I told him. "You're in the hospital." He swallowed hard. That's the problem. I documented the interaction as confusion secondary to dehydration. I'd seen it before. Patients say strange things when their body chemistry is off. But when I stepped out into the hallway, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The door to the old service corridor at the end of the hall was slightly ajar. It wasn't supposed to be. Facilities kept it shut because the corridor beyond led to outdated storage rooms and an unused stairwell. I'd walked past that door dozens of times. It was always closed. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe housekeeping propped it earlier and forgot. Around 1:30 a.m., the nurse assigned to room 6 called me. "He's asking for you," she said. "He won't calm down." When I returned, Daniel was gripping the bed rails so tightly his knuckles were pale. "They were under the bed," he whispered. "Who?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. He looked at me like I'd just asked the wrong question. "You didn't check," he said. "They said you wouldn't." I felt irritation flicker under my professionalism. "There's no one under your bed," I said gently. "You're alone in here." He shook his head slowly. "Not alone. Never alone." I crouched and shined a flashlight under the bed anyway, mostly to reassure him. There was nothing there, but as I stood back up, I noticed something on the linoleum floor near the foot of the bed. A smudge. Dark, faint, shaped like a partial handprint. It could have been from staff moving equipment. It could have been anything, but it was fresh. I had been in that room less than an hour earlier, and the floor had been clean. I mentioned it to the nurse, and she shrugged. "Probably from transport," she said. "You're overthinking it." Maybe I was. At 2:12 a.m., the monitor in isolation 6 flatlined. It wasn't gradual. No alarm buildup, just a sharp, continuous tone. The nurse and I ran in together. Daniel was sitting upright in bed, eyes open. The monitor showed no heart rhythm. For a second, my brain refused to process it. He was looking directly at me, breathing shallow but steady. I checked his pulse manually. Strong, regular. The monitor kept screaming. I disconnected the leads and reattached them, thinking it was faulty contact. The flatline continued. Daniel smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't exaggerated. Just a subtle upward curve, like he'd been expecting this. "They're closer now," he said. The nurse looked at me, fear creeping into her expression. "Switch monitors," she whispered. We rolled in a portable unit and attached new leads. Flatline again, but his pulse never changed. My hands were shaking now. Machines fail, yes, but not two different systems, in the exact same way, at the exact same time. Then the overhead lights flickered once. The nurse backed toward the door. "Call security," she said. I reached for the wall phone. Dead. No dial tone. Daniel's gaze shifted to the corner of the ceiling above my shoulder. "They're coming out," he said. I turned instinctively. There was nothing there, but in the reflection of the black TV screen mounted on the wall, I saw movement. Behind me, low to the ground, something crawling along the wall near the floor, moving toward the bed. I spun around. Nothing. The nurse let out a small, involuntary sound. "Did you see that?" she whispered. I didn't answer. The service corridor door at the end of the hall slammed shut, with a heavy echo that carried through the unit. The monitor stopped flatlining. It switched abruptly back to a normal rhythm. Daniel's smile faded. "They don't like light," he said quietly. I grabbed a portable flashlight from the crash cart and shined it around the baseboards, under the bed, across the corners. Nothing visible, but the air felt wrong. Heavier. Charged. Security finally arrived after we used a personal cell phone to call down. They swept the corridor, the isolation room, even the sealed service hallway. No one found anything. When they opened the service corridor door fully, we all noticed the same thing. The dust on the floor had been disturbed, not by footprints, by drag marks, parallel lines running from the far end of the corridor toward Isolation 6, like something had been pulled slowly along the ground. The security officer looked at me and said, "Probably equipment." But there was no equipment down there. At 3:07 a.m., Daniel's heart actually stopped. This time it was real. We initiated CPR immediately. No delay, no hesitation. But as we worked, something else happened. The isolation room door began to close on its own. Not slammed. Slowly, deliberately. The nurse nearest the entrance braced her foot against it, forcing it back open. "Don't let it close," Daniel whispered faintly between compressions. We worked him for 15 minutes. No response. He was pronounced at 3:24 a.m. As the room went quiet and the team stepped back, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The partial handprint on the floor was gone. In its place were several faint smudges leading toward the service corridor. We transferred his body to the morgue before sunrise. Later that morning, I checked the patient ID system out of habit. Daniel Crow's record was incomplete. No scanned ID, no insurance data. The ER intake photo was missing. There was only one timestamp, 2:11 a.m., the moment the monitor first flatlined. When I asked records about it, they said there must have been a documentation error. There was no documentation error. 2 weeks later, Isolation 6 was permanently closed. They said it was due to ventilation issues. But sometimes, during overnight shifts, I still walk past the sealed door. And sometimes, around 2:12 a.m., I hear something faint from behind it. Not voices, not footsteps, just a soft dragging sound, moving slowly along the floor, like something is still trying to get out. Story 2. The elevator that wouldn't stop on the 3rd floor. I was a contracted night janitor at a small hospital in western Pennsylvania, the kind of place that still had carpet in some hallways and framed inspirational posters from the 90s. I didn't work for the hospital directly, which meant I wasn't part of the gossip loop, and nobody bothered to warn me about the things they'd already learned to ignore. My shift started at 11 p.m. and ended at 7 a.m., and my routine was always the same. ER bathrooms first, then the waiting area, then the surgical corridor once the last cases were done. The building had a sleepy rhythm at night, and as long as you stayed in the lit areas and kept your headphones low enough to hear pages, you could almost pretend it was just another office building. Almost. My second week, my supervisor handed me a key card and told me I'd be covering 3 North as well, because the usual guy quit without notice. "It's mostly empty," he said, like that was good news. "Just do the trash, wipe the rails, and don't touch anything with a red sticker." I asked what the red sticker meant. He shrugged. "Bio. Old storage. Doesn't matter. You'll see it." 3 North was on the 3rd floor, and the only way up after midnight was the service elevator, the slow one with scuffed stainless steel walls and a smell like bleach trapped under metal. The public elevators were supposed to lock out for security, which sounded reassuring, until you realized it just meant you were more alone. I rode up with my cart and my mop bucket, staring at the floor numbers light up one by one. The doors opened onto a dim hallway that looked unfinished, like someone had started renovating and got bored halfway through. Half the ceiling tiles were newer than the others. The lights hummed. A few doors had plastic sheeting taped over the small windows. The first thing I noticed was the sound. Down on the active floors, you hear monitors and footsteps and intercoms. Up here, you could hear the building breathe, air moving through vents, pipes ticking, the faint distant thump of laundry machines somewhere below. Every noise carried. Room doors lined the hall, but most were shut and unmarked. A few had those red stickers my supervisor mentioned, slapped crookedly near the handles. Not biohazard labels, not official warnings, just plain red dots, like someone had decided quietly, "Don't go in here," without wanting to explain why. I did what I was paid to do. I emptied bins that were mostly empty, wiped smudges from handrails, and tried not to stare at the sealed windows. About an hour in, I rolled my cart past a nurse's station that had been stripped down to bare counters. The computers were gone, but the call light panel was still mounted on the wall, dark except for one tiny green LED. That stayed on like a heartbeat. As I passed, the panel chirped once, then a soft ding. A red light flicked on next to a room number, 312. I stopped with my hand still on the cart handle. The ding was the same tone you hear on active floors when a patient hits the call button. It repeated, steady and polite, like someone waiting for help. I told myself it had to be a wiring glitch. Old panel, half-shut wing, bad sensors. I stood there long enough for it to ding 3 times. Then I did the thing my job and my conscience both demanded. I walked toward room 312. The door was closed. No window, just painted metal. There was a red sticker near the handle. I didn't touch it. I leaned close and listened. Nothing. No TV. No coughing. No voice. The ding stopped the moment I got close, like the system knew I was there. I felt ridiculous, standing in an empty hospital hallway, listening to a silent door. I turned back toward my cart, and as I did, the service elevator at the end of the hall made its arrival chime. I hadn't called it. The doors opened anyway, slow and obedient, revealing the empty elevator car and the harsh light inside. Then the doors tried to close. They stopped halfway and reopened, like something was blocking the sensor. Nothing was there. I stared at that open elevator, like it was a mouth. The panel above it still displayed 3, steady, not flickering. I could have sworn I heard a soft scuff from inside the car, the sound rubber soles make on metal. I rolled my cart toward it, because I didn't want to be trapped on a floor that was suddenly acting like it had a mind. As I approached, the doors slid shut smoothly, like it had simply changed its mind about me. I hit the call button. The elevator came right back, doors opening with that same patient slowness. Empty again. I loaded my cart and pressed 1. The button lit. The doors closed. The elevator didn't move. It sat there humming, a low vibration through the metal floor, and the floor display stayed on 3, like it was stuck. I pressed 1 again. Nothing. I pressed door open. The doors opened instantly, almost too fast, like it had been waiting for me to ask. Outside, in the hallway, the call light panel dinged again. Room 312. I looked from the open elevator to the blinking light down the hall and felt something settle into my stomach. That wasn't superstition. It was the practical fear of being manipulated. The same feeling you get when someone is playing with you, but keeping it just barely plausible. I stepped out of the elevator and walked back to the nurse's station. The red light beside 312 blinked steadily. I leaned over the counter, trying to see if the panel had any notes or labels. That's when I noticed a thin layer of dust on the counter, except for one clean streak across it, like a forearm had rested there recently. I hadn't touched it. My throat went tight. I picked up my radio and called down to security. "Hey, this is night janitorial," I said, trying to keep my tone normal. "I'm on 3 North. I'm getting a call light from 312, and the service elevator is acting weird. Can someone come up?" The radio crackled. "Say again?" The voice answered, but it sounded far away, like the building itself was eating the signal. "I'm on 3 North, I repeated. "I need someone." The radio cut out in the middle of my sentence. Not static, not interference, just dead silence, like the channel had been muted. I stared at the radio in my gloved hand. Pressed the talk button again and again. Nothing. Behind me, the elevator doors chimed. I turned. The service elevator doors were open again, even though I was standing nowhere near the call button. The light inside seemed brighter than before, harsh and flat, and there was something on the floor of the elevator. A wet footprint, one single print, dark against the metal, like a bare foot had stepped out of water and onto the elevator floor. You could see the toe marks. You could see the arch. Then another footprint appeared beside it, not forming in front of my eyes like a movie effect, but becoming visible as the elevator light caught it, like it had been there, and my brain refused to register it until that moment. I backed up so fast I hit my cart and rattled my bucket. The call light panel dinged again, louder in the silence. I should have left immediately. I know that, but my mind latched onto the simplest explanation it could tolerate. There was someone up here, hiding, and they were messing with equipment. A person was scarier than a glitch, but at least a person made sense. I walked toward room 312 with my keys in my hand like they were a weapon. The sticker near the handle looked newer up close, the kind of adhesive that hadn't collected dust yet. I leaned in and saw writing in pen on the edge of the red dot, small enough you'd miss it unless you were looking for it. Not in use. That was the lie people tell themselves to feel safe. The call light stopped as soon as I reached the door. The hallway felt too still, like the air had thickened. I listened again. Still nothing. I reached for the handle anyway, then froze. From the other side of the door, something tapped back. 3 soft taps, spaced like a person copying you. My hand jerked away. I didn't knock. I hadn't made any sound. I was holding my breath. The door handle turned, slowly, just a few degrees, then stopped, like whoever was inside was testing whether it was locked, without committing to opening it. I stepped back until my shoulders hit the wall opposite. My heart was banging so hard it made my vision pulse. The handle turned again, farther this time, and I heard the faintest scrape of metal against metal, like a key being inserted from the inside. Then the hallway lights flickered once, and in that one flicker, I saw someone standing near the nurse's station where I'd been seconds ago. A shape in dark clothing, head tilted, too still to be normal. The next instant the light stabilized and the shape was gone. My body made the decision my brain couldn't. I ran for the stairs. I didn't care about the cart, the supplies, the paperwork. I grabbed my phone and sprinted down the hall. Halfway to the stairwell, the service elevator chimes sounded again behind me, as if it was following. I hit the stairwell door and shoved. Locked. Hospitals lock certain stairwells at night. I knew that, but it still felt like betrayal. I yanked harder, rattling the handle until my wrist hurt. Behind me, the call light panel dinged again. Closer now only because I was hyper-aware of every sound. I spun and ran back toward the elevator, because it was the only way down. The doors were open, waiting like they had been expecting this choice. The wet footprints were still there, darker now, like they hadn't dried at all. I stepped into the car, fighting the urge to gag, and hit one repeatedly. The button lit. The doors closed. The elevator dropped so suddenly my stomach lifted. It moved faster than it ever had before, skipping the usual slow crawl. The floor numbers flashed. 2. 1. The doors opened onto the first floor service corridor behind the ER, bright and normal and loud enough to feel like safety. I rolled out shaking, expecting someone to ask what I was doing. No one did. People were busy. The world kept turning. I went straight to the security desk and tried to explain, words tumbling out wrong. The guard on duty stared at me like I'd told him I saw a UFO. He pulled up the elevator log on his monitor, frowned. It never went to 3, he said. I felt my blood drain. I was just on 3, I said. It took me down. He turned the screen toward me. The log showed the elevator sitting on floor 1 all night, with a couple trips to 2 for linen runs. No recorded stop on 3. No call. Maybe you used the other elevator, he said. There is no other elevator to that wing, I snapped, then immediately regretted my tone because I sounded unstable. He finally agreed to walk up with me. By the time we reached the 3rd floor, the call light panel was dark. The service elevator sat closed and quiet. We went to room 312. The red sticker was gone, not peeled off and left behind. Gone cleanly, like it had never been there. The security guard tried the handle. Unlocked. He opened the door and clicked on the light. The room was empty, stripped down. No bed, no equipment. Just a bare space with scuff marks on the floor and a faint, stale smell. like old sweat trapped in drywall. Then the guard frowned and stepped inside, pointing at the wall near the door. There, taped neatly at shoulder height, was a fresh patient ID sticker, blank, just the date and time printed at the top. And underneath, written in small block letters, were 2 words that made my throat close. Next cleaning. Story 4. Code blue in a room that doesn't exist. I worked hospital security for almost 8 years in a small-town medical center in upstate New York. Nights were my thing. Less drama, fewer visitors, more predictable patterns. After midnight, the building changed. You could walk entire corridors without seeing another person. The fluorescent lights hummed louder. Elevators sounded hollow. Every sound carried. By my 4th year, I knew the layout better than most nurses. Every stairwell, every badge-only door, every camera blind spot. That's why what happened that night still doesn't sit right with me. It was 2:06 a.m. when my radio cracked to life. Code blue, room 402. Code blue, room 402. The voice was overhead, not from my handheld. A hospital-wide announcement. Clear, urgent. Room 402 was on the 4th floor, a mixed-use wing that had a few long-term patients and a couple empty rooms waiting for renovation. I was already moving before the second announcement finished. When you hear code blue, you run. No hesitation. I hit the elevator and mashed the button. It arrived almost instantly, which felt lucky at the time. The doors shut and the car climbed smoothly. 4th floor doors opened. The hallway was empty. No crash cart. No nurses sprinting. No doctors calling out orders. Just silence. That's wrong. When a code blue is called, it's chaos. Alarms, footsteps, urgency. You feel it in the air. I stepped out and pressed my radio. Security to 402. What's the status? No answer. I walked quickly toward the 400 hall. The overhead lights were dimmed to night mode, casting everything in a dull yellow wash. My boots echoed louder than usual. Room numbers ticked past. Then the numbering skipped. I stopped walking. I stepped back. There was number 402. My pulse began to climb. I'd done this floor hundreds of times. I knew there was number 402. The architects had skipped it during a redesign because of plumbing placement. It went from 401 straight to 403. I pulled out my phone and checked the hospital floor map we all had access to. Number 402. My radio crackled. Breathing. Not static. Not background noise. Slow, steady breathing. Who's on this channel? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. The breathing stopped. Then a whisper. You're late. It was faint but unmistakable. Not distorted. Not mechanical. My throat tightened. Identify yourself, I said, and even to my own ears, it sounded weak. No response. I walked toward the far end of the hall, where a temporary plastic barrier blocked off renovation space. The kind zip-tied to poles with a sign reading area closed. The plastic was slightly open at one corner. Behind it, darkness, and a door that shouldn't have been there. Metal, hospital grade, with a small number plate screwed into the center. My skin went cold so fast it felt like stepping into winter. The overhead lights above the renovation area flickered once. I stood there, staring at a room number that didn't exist 5 minutes ago. My radio clicked again. Code blue, room 402. This time the voice wasn't overhead. It came from inside the darkened area beyond the plastic. I pulled the plastic aside and stepped through. The air inside was colder than the hallway. Not dramatically, but enough that I felt it in my teeth. The floor was unfinished concrete. No equipment. No signage. Just the door. I approached slowly. My training told me to call for backup. My pride told me not to sound crazy on an open channel. I tried the handle. Unlocked. The door opened inward without resistance. The room inside looked fully operational. Hospital bed. Monitor. For pull. Overhead lights dimmed but on. Like a functioning patient room hidden behind a renovation barrier. And on the bed, a man was lying there. Early 30s maybe. Eyes open. Skin pale but not gray. He was breathing shallowly. The heart monitor beside him showed a flat line. The steady tone filled the room. Flat. Unbroken. I stepped closer, my boots sounding wrong on the concrete floor. Sir, I said cautiously. His eyes shifted toward me. You took your time, he said calmly. My pulse spiked. Who are you? Who admitted you? He didn't answer. He just stared at me like he knew something I didn't. I looked at the monitor again. Flatline. I checked his neck for a pulse. Strong. Normal. My stomach twisted. I grab my radio. I need medical staff to 402 immediately. Silence. I tried again. Dead channel. Behind me, the door clicked shut. Not slammed, just latched. I spun around and grabbed the handle. Locked. I twisted harder. Nothing. The monitor tone grew louder, sharper, drilling into my ears. "You shouldn't have come alone," the man on the bed said quietly. I backed away from the door. "This room isn't on the floor plan," I said, more to myself than to him. He smiled faintly. "It is tonight." The overhead lights flickered once, then stabilized. The monitor abruptly switched from flatline to normal rhythm, then back to flatline, then normal again, like someone flipping a switch. My reflection caught in the dark TV screen across the room. For half a second, I saw someone standing behind me. Too close. I turned instantly. No one there. When I looked back at the bed, it was empty. The sheets were undisturbed. The monitor was off. No tone, no rhythm, just silence. I staggered backward, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might black out. The door handle turned on its own. The latch clicked. The door opened slowly. The renovation area beyond was gone. No plastic barrier, no unfinished concrete, just the normal hallway. Number 402. I stepped out into the hall. The fourth floor was exactly as I remembered it. Quiet, dim, ordinary. I keyed my radio again. It worked perfectly. Security status? Dispatch asked, as if nothing had happened. Did anyone call Code Blue to 402? I asked. Pause. There is number 402, dispatch replied. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I rode the elevator down and sat in the security office for the rest of my shift, staring at camera feeds that showed nothing unusual. The next morning, I requested access to archived floor plans. There had never been a 402, not in any version. But that night, around 2:06 a.m., one camera on the fourth floor recorded something strange. The footage shows me walking down the hallway toward 401, then stopping, then turning slightly to my right, and then standing completely still for almost 7 minutes. Not moving, not speaking, just staring at a blank wall where 402 would have been. There is no door in the footage, no barrier, no room, just me. At 2:13 a.m., I lift my radio and speak. The audio recording from my body cam picked up only one clear sentence. "You're late." I don't remember saying it. I don't work nights anymore. But sometimes, when I wake up suddenly around 2:06 a.m., I hear a flatline tone in my ears. And I know, somehow, that if I ever go back to that hospital at the wrong time, room 402 will be there. And this time, I won't leave alone.